Ward Kimball, a veteran Disney animator.
We knew he was planning this feature. It was a dream he almost had from the beginning. And he could see that just putting out silly symphonies and Mickey Mouse cartoons really weren't the eventual answer. That to get something big in Hollywood, you had to make a feature, right? So he chose Snow White as a story that would lend itself best to the way we worked. The whole studio participated in the story for ideas and gags, and then they would go through and pick out the ones that were useful. And I thought it was a very encouraging thing for all the talent. It made you think about not only the animation, the backgrounds, but it gave you a little thought about plot and story. When I went to the opening of, or the premiere of Snow White at the old Carthay Circle Theater, we were all very apprehensive because we were told by all the big movie moguls in Hollywood that people just wouldn't sit still for an hour and a half of cartoons. It was okay, 6-7 minutes like the shorts, but an hour and a half, no way. Big reason was that you run out of funny things to do. See, their idea, and of course it was our early idea, you had to have a laugh a minute. And they couldn't sit still for an hour and a half because the bright colors would hurt your eyes. Everybody get up and walk out of the... But Walt, of course, plugged ahead. He didn't believe that. He felt that if you had a solid story, not only laughs in it, but pathos and tragedy and so forth, it would go. And I remember that night, the opening of Snow White at the Carthay Theater, and here were all the big stars in Hollywood. And this is the first time I ever wore a tux in my life. And I sat about 2/3 of the way back, and here were all the luminaries of Hollywood all around. Especially I saw Clark Gable and Carole Lombard and the rest of them. And the laughs just came in a steady stream. But when Snow White bites that poison apple and becomes unconscious, and she's laid out on the slab, or the bier as they call it, the picture gets very serious. And this is where Walt knew what he was doing. Even though these are a bunch of cartoons and these grossly exaggerated little guys with the big noses were in it, everybody in that theater was crying. I heard the sobs. I couldn't believe it. It's supposed to be just a cartoon. Everybody's crying. And when the picture was over, and someday my prince will come, and they ride off into the sunset, the lights go on, and I watched them. I stood in the foyer, and biggest stars in Hollywood, Irene Dunne, you name, were all wiping the tears out of their eyes. Now this sounds implausible, but it happened. So that was proof that Walt knew how to balance a story, like in a good play, a good movie. It has that great balance of all those ingredients, and he had it in the cartoon, and it was believable, even though these were exaggerated little dwarfs and a real exaggerated witch and so forth. I was cast as an animator to do the soup sequence, and this was an ill-fated sequence that was supposed to have happened after the dwarfs wash up. And it had a song that was written by Frank Churchill to go with it. And it was all finished and all cleaned up, and he discovered that the whole picture was about 10 or 15 minutes over length, and he wanted to cut it down around an hour and 25, hour 30. Even though Walt thought it was one of the funniest sequences in the picture, he looked at it over and over, and he came to the conclusion that both the bed building sequence and the soup sequence held up the flow of the story. He should get on with it. And apologetically, he called me up and broke the news to me. And of course, I've been working on it for a year and a half, and it was quite a blow, but I agreed with him. I could see that it was just holding the progress of the story. Let's get the plot going. To show you that this was a very important sequence in the picture, even the merchandise had pictures of the soup sequence on the cover, and it was an accepted part of the picture, but it was finally cut out. I thought you'd be interested in that little bit of Disneyana.